When creating classes, methods, properties, and other types, you almost always need to specify their accessibility level. This is where Acess modifiers come in. Acess modifiers control what parts of your code have access to other parts of your code. Hi, I'm Victor, and today in Height Above Sea Level, we'll be looking at Acess modifiers in C#. Before we get started, if you want to talk more about this kind of thing, be sure to follow me on Twitch at Height Above Sea Level, where I do some live coding sessions as well as try and answer some of your questions as best I can. This video builds off of what we covered in the classes video, so if you're not familiar with classes, watch that video first and I'll link it to the top right of your screen. But if you are, then let's get started. Now in C#, there are 6 types of Acess modifiers. We have public, we have private, we have protected, we have internal, and then we have protected, internal, and finally we have private protected. Now out of all of these, the ones you'll see the most being used are public, private, protected, and internal. Sometimes protected, internal, and private protected, but the ones I've seen the most are public, private, protected, and internal, which are the ones we're going to be focusing in this video. These two, if you want to learn more about them, I'll link the article in the description below. But for now, we're looking at public, private, protected, and internal. Now, as you may have noticed, we've used public keyword here and also in the car class. So why don't we start by looking at the public Acess modifier. So what does the public Acess modifier do? Anything declared as public means it can be accessible from this assembly or any assembly referencing this. So simply put, that means anything declared as public can be accessed from pretty much anywhere in the code. I don't want to get into the details of an assembly. Remember, an assembly is many classes together make a namespace, and many namespaces together make an assembly, and then the assembly is the one that when it is compiled becomes an executable, which then is your application. Speaking of which, namespaces. I forgot to add something in the classes video. So a namespace. Previous versions of console applications had also had a namespace. And this namespace was the same as your project. So as you can see on the right side, my first app, the namespace is also the name of your project. So this would be inside here. And just to test, I can say console.writeLine, then say hello world. Control and F5 to build. You see it writes hello world on the console. So this is the setup that was in previous version. I forgot to mention this namespace. But back to public. All these are public. Properties public, the method is public, and the class itself is declared as public. That means it's accessible from anywhere in this code. So let's make a new instance of a class. Like I can say Toyota. It is equals to a new car. And remember, like before, because we have a constructor here, we have to specify the color, model name, max speed. So we can say the color is, maybe you can say yellow. The model name, whoops, not that. But the model name, we can say Toyota, something generic like Toyota Cruiser. And then we can say max speed is 160 miles per hour. And remember the dot notation, Toyota dot. You see we have access to all these properties. Color, has photos, max speed, and model name because they're declared as public. If we declare them as something else, which I'll show you with the private and protected keywords, they won't be accessible. Same thing for methods. We have access to these methods because they're declared as public. So you can say max speed, we can say Toyota.start, stop, and all those other methods and properties. So just for demonstration, let me write one on the console. Toyota.color, Control and F5, yellow. You see, it's declared as public. It can be accessed from pretty much anywhere in the code. But there are some places it won't be accessed, but that depends on your application as well. You know, when you're building something, the code that you write will determine what access is accessible here. So I can't give you a conclusive picture of where it'll be accessible. So just think of this as pretty much anywhere in the code, but the technical explanation is within the SEM assembly or an assembly referencing this assembly. So now that we learned about access modifier, the access modifier called public, why don't we look at the one called private? And what is a private access modifier? An access mod, anything declared as private can be accessed from within the same class Actually, that's it. Anything declared as private can only be accessed from within the same class. But before I show you that, if you're enjoying the content, please consider supporting me over on Patreon at patreon.com/height above sea level. And all patrons will get this custom Sakura theme that I came up with for Visual Studio. And I have all the instructions to show you how to set it up so your code editor looks just like mine. So if you're enjoying it, go over to patreon.com/height above sea level. And if you support, you'll get this custom Sakura theme as a thank you. All right, let's look at the private access modifier. Why don't we try and specify something as private? Let's say this method. Let's say the start method is private. Now that we know the definition, can be accessed from only, let me put the word only here, only from within the same class. So this is private. We've created an instance of Toyota. Let's try and access the method. Remember, the method is start. Now if I say Toyota.s, you see, it only has stop and toString. And if I put the dot notation so you can see the methods here, you see start is not available here. And why is that? Because we've declared that class, that method, as private. You can even do it for stop. You can even do it for properties as well. But I'm going to use a method. I'll tell you how to do it with properties, but I can just do it real quick here. This is just touching on setting private properties. And I'll touch on this in the properties and fields video. But real quick, if I say Toyota, whoops, not that, but Toyota.color, you see, it doesn't show because I said the color is private. But when I turn it back to public, and then I say Toyota.color, I can now access it. But what do I mean by it? I can access it only within the same class when it's declared as private. You see color here. Let me do color to be private. You see, I can't access it over here when I say Toyota.color, but see, there's nothing here, but I can access it here. You see, I'm accessing this from within the same class. This is the car class. This is private. So as long as we're in here, we have access to anything declared as private. Even this method, let's say you wanted to call this method. Remember calling methods? I can do that like this. I can say start and it'll call this method, but I don't want to do that. So I'll just remove that and I will leave this as public. So why would you want to declare something as private? This is because of a term known as encapsulation. What is encapsulation? Encapsulation involves hiding the implementation detail. So implementation details of a class and restricting access to certain members. And members are basically the property. A property and a method inside a class, those are its members. So everything inside here, minus the constructor, these properties and these methods are known as members. So when in the encapsulation that I'm talking about here, we are hiding the implementation details. So what is implementation detail? Implementation details is stuff, anything that is unique to this car. So let's say when you're creating a car, it has like a precious metal you don't want anyone else to know about. That's what you'll declare as private. So let's say private string metal used, and you can do it like this. or I'm introducing something known as a field. This right here is a field. As you can see, normally I like putting an underscore like this. This is similar to a property, but it's called a field. It doesn't have any getter or setters, but it's called a field. And these are the ones that are normally private because these are implementation detail. When you're creating a car, nothing else you know about the metal used to create the car. Only the car class should be concerned about that metal used. Whoever is creating a car only needs to worry about the color, the model name, if it has 4 doors, the max speed, but metal used, this is private. It's implementation detail. We're encapsulating that inside this class, and we're restricting access to it with the private access modifier. But this is just an intro to fields. It's similar to properties, but I'm just introducing it. I plan to cover this in a different video, so if you do want to know more about them, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so that you know when this fields and properties video goes out, you're ready and you get to see it right away. So I'll just leave this here. And that right there is the private access modifier. Anything declared as private can only be accessed from within the same class. It's used mostly for fields. It's part of encapsulating where we hide the implementation details of a class and restrict access to certain members. All right. So why don't we look at the next one? The next one we saw is called protected. So what is a protected access modifier? When anything is declared as protected, it can only be accessed from within the same class or derived classes. This is a new term, derived classes. I haven't mentioned it, but I'm going to introduce it here today. It's part of a term known as inheritance. So what is inheritance? In order to understand this, I will need to create a couple of other classes. But let's look at it as an example. Let's say after a car, you want to be a little more specific and you want to create, maybe let's say you want to create a Ferrari, you want to create maybe a Nissan, maybe even a Ford. But the thing is, when you're creating those 3 cars, all of them will have a metal used, they will have a color, they will have a model name, 4 doors, max speed, and they'll also have these methods. Let me declare this as public. So all the cars that you have will have these properties and methods. You see, a Nissan will have a color, model name, and start, stop, all that stuff. Same for, a Ferrari, same for a Nissan, same for a Ford. But in order to make it so that we don't have to repeat all this code every time we're creating a car, we can inherit from this class. So we inherit all this code. And how do we do this? This is how you inherit. You inherit from a class in C#. Public class Ferrari, just as normal. And then you say colon car, curly braces, and everything you want to go, anything you want to write goes in here. For now, I'll remove this constructor. That's why there's a red underline here, because of this constructor. I will comment this out. Control K, Control C. I don't want to get into the details too much about that, just because it might be confusing and I might be putting too much in your head. But this is inheritance. And let me show you. Let me remove this as well, so we don't get an error. So what is this? Ferrari colon car. What is this? It means Ferrari inherits from car. That means all this code is now part of the Ferrari class. Let me show you that on the console. So let's say we create a new Ferrari instance. Remember, an instance of a car. Tab twice to finish the sentence for me. So this is the Ferrari class. Then let's say Ferrari dot. Look at this. Color, has 4 doors, max speed, model name. Where are all these coming from? I literally have nothing in here. So how is it that we have access to this, all these properties, and even the look, start, stop, move forward? How do we have access to that? Because we're inheriting from the car. The car already has all this, all that stuff, So all we need to do is put a semicolon, and that means now we have all those properties and all those methods that are public. Same thing if you wanted to create a Nissan, remember public class Nissan, this also inherits from car, curly braces. And if you create a Nissan instance, so var Nissan, new Nissan, say, and then we use it, look, same thing. We have all the properties. Now, how does this all tie back? How does all this go back to the protected keyword? Now we know what a derived class is. Ferrari inherits from car, or Ferrari derives from car. Ferrari, therefore, is a derived class. Nissan inherits or derives from a car, and Nissan is therefore a derived class. Now, if I set a keyword to be, or a property or method to be protected, as so, what does protected do? Anything declared as protected can only be accessed from within the same class or derived class. So this method that is protected, move forward, can only be used in here or in here. Let's say you wanted to do something with that property or that method. Whoops. If you wanted to do something with that property or that method, you'll do it in here or in here. Anything declared as protected can only be accessed from within the same class or derived class. So let me show you this. So let's say, look, we have a Ferrari instance. Ferrari. And now over here, this method, move forward, is declared as protected. If you press the dot and we go to all the methods, we don't see move forward here. Why is that? Because it's declared as protected. We can only use it inside this class or inside the Ferrari class. In here, if we're doing something with the Ferrari class, want to do something with that method. That's another video for another day. Hopefully, if you want to learn more about methods, that one is also on the horizon, God willing, when it comes out. Subscribe and you will get the notification. But protected only in here or in the class. That's why we don't have access to it. You can also say max speed as protected. And then when you go to Ferrari, put the dot, go to our properties, you don't see max speed because that is declared as protected. And if I put it back to public, if I put this max speed back to public, save, Control and S, I come back here, dot, then I say properties, look, max speed is back. So that is protected in a nutshell. Anything declared as protected can only be accessed from within the same class or derived classes. And this is all these depend on your application. There's no hard and fast rule to using them, but it's just that to know that public can be accessed from same assembly or derived or assembly that references it, or pretty much anywhere in the code. Private, hide implementation detail. And if you need to access something from within the base class, this is called the base class, and then these are derived classes, you use protected. All right, that is a bit of an intro to protected. Interestingly enough, before I go to the last one, internal, you can also use these in here. Private get or protected get. You can also use these in here. But that is for the fields and properties videos. So stick around for that. Subscribe if you want to learn more about them. Finally, we have internal keyword. But I've just remembered something. What happens if you don't specify this? Let's say you forget to do this. I mean, you don't get an error. So what does that mean? If you don't specify anything, then it is inferred that it is private. So when no access modified, let me just say this is inferred to be private when no access modifier is present. So if this is missing, if the access modifier is missing, it's considered private. So even if you do that for the class, this car class is seen as private. And let me look at the program. As you can see, I get errors now saying is not accessible. Inconsistent accessibility. Base class car is less accessible than class Ferrari because this is now private by default. You can put it there if you want, or you can leave it. It all depends on how you want to work. If you want it to be private, you can decide to leave it, but I normally like having the private keyword there just so it's readable, and if I'm working with someone else, it's also readable, but it's not a hard and fast rule. You can leave it if you don't want to. If you don't want to leave it, then add it. It's all up to you. All right, finally, internal access modify. An internal access, anything declared as internal is accessible only from, let me say, can be accessed by code in the same assembly, but not from another assembly. Another thing about access modifier, or not access modifier, but internal modifier, is that you'll see it used mostly with like class. So you'll see like a class like instead of public, you have internal, and you see this still works because internal is like it's like the umbrella is higher than public. So public is from same assembly, or public is from the same assembly or assembly that references it. Internal is like another step, another layer above public. So from within the same assembly, but not from another assembly. So internal works. And here also you can use internal. I've rarely seen people use internal for things like methods. I don't see much of this. It's mostly for the class level, where you'll see, like here, you'll see something declared as internal. So let's say, for example, you have an application that deals with renting out vehicles, and you have the renting out part of your application, and then you have the processing payment part of your application. So let's say this is part of one assembly and this is part of another assembly. If the car class, this class here, is declared as internal, that means you can only access it inside this assembly, but not this processing payments assembly. Again, just remember that little thing I said at the beginning: classes, many classes together, stored in a namespace. Many namespaces together become an assembly, and then from here, this assembly is what becomes the DLL, or the executable. I'm sure you've seen this XE. This is the one that when this is compiled, it becomes executable, and then from here, you run the application, and then you start doing your stuff. So assembly is the highest. It has a lot of code, and then if it's declared internal, like this is the class car is internal, it can only be accessed from here, but not in this assembly. And that right there is access modifiers in a nutshell. That's all I had for you guys. Did you learn something about access modifiers today? Did I go too fast or too slowly? And have you used access modifiers in a different language and are coming to C# to see how things are done over here? Let me know in the comments below. Again, if you did enjoy the content, then consider supporting me over on Patreon at patreon.com, and you'll get this custom Sakura theme that I came up with, and I hope you like it. And there's more colors to these, to the properties and all this stuff that I'm using. There are more colors to this Sakura theme. So if you're enjoying the content, consider supporting me over on Patreon, and you'll get the theme for yourself. Also, I do stream on Twitch at height above sea level if you want to talk more about this kind of thing live on stream. And if that doesn't work, come hang out on Discord instead. Just click the link in the description below and become a member of the Water Tribe today. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, from me to you, deuces.